The movie Gattaca takes place in the future where the majority of people in the world are genetically modified. For example, there is a man who was genetically modified to have 6 fingers instead of 5. So he had 12 fingers total because his parents wanted him to be a professional pianist. But what if he didn't want to be a pianist? When you were younger, did you ever say to your parents, just let me live my own life? Well, if genetic modification of humans was legal, you wouldn't be able to live your own life because your parents would have chosen your future before you were even born. The genetic engineering of humans should stay illegal. There are global laws against the practice of genetically engineering humans because the risks outweigh the benefits. First, let me give you some background knowledge about the general practice of genetic engineering. Genetic engineering is defined in Oxford dictionaries as the deliberate modification of the characteristics of an organism by manipulating its genetic material. The Science History Institute stated in an article that was last updated in 2017 that the first direct manipulation of DNA is credited to 3 men: Herbert Boyer, Stanley Cohen, and Paul Berg. Together, they invented recombinant DNA technology in 1972. They used this form of biotechnology to insert genetic material from one organism into the genetic material of a separate organism. Shortly after, in the late 70s and early 80s, crops were being genetically modified and consumed by the general public, as confirmed in the Biology Wise article titled History of Genetic Engineering. The first experiments involving the edits of animal genes, including mice, sheep, and cattle, began in the 80s. As these experiments on crops and animals continued to advance, people started getting more and more curious as to the possibilities and what genetic modification could do for the human species. But there are currently laws prohibiting trials to test gene editing techniques on human beings because of the uncertainty surrounding this new technology and the ethical and moral issues it brings with it. So, why are people pushing for this ban to be lifted? Well, there could be potential benefits that result from editing human genes. For example, genetically modifying human genes could stop inheritable diseases from being passed down to future generations. And with some inheritable diseases causing people to live shorter lives, this technique of cutting out the gene responsible for that disease could potentially allow humans to live longer. While there are potential benefits that could come out of genetically engineering humans, there are many risks that outweigh the benefits. Correcting for a specific gene could potentially cause the mutation of a separate gene. According to health research funding, there is too great of a possibility that unintentional genetic changes can cause unforeseen health problems in the newborns that receive the surgery. Stein quoted Dronovsky, who runs the Center for Genetics and Society, in a 2019 NPR News article saying there is no need to subject our children to the risks it would entail because we already have ways to prevent transmission of inheritable diseases. Speaking of newborns, the success birth rate for genetically modified animals is extremely low. Bryant and Turnpenny stated in their 2003 article that the success birth rate for genetically manipulated mice is only about 25%. They also stated that this genetic manipulation was later tested on farm animals with only a 2 to 4% success birth rate. This means that the birth success rate for humans could be even lower. Genetic modification could lead to decreased genetic diversity. Manipulating the human genome would decrease the diversity available to the human species at a cellular level. According to health research funding, there are several pockets of culture that see issues with disease and mutation at a higher level than the general population because the individuals stay exclusively in their cultural groups. This technology would extend that problem to the rest of humanity. Genetic modification of human beings has been considered off limits because of its slippery slope of what is considered ethical and its permanent effects. According to Lee's 2020 article, because gene expression level is unique to each individual human, every baby would be a test subject. The changes we would make in our DNA with this technology will be passed on to our future generations. Therefore, the results, no matter good or bad, would be permanent. Dranowski asked an important question in her 2014 article published in the New York Times. How far will we go in our efforts to engineer humans? If we lift this ban preventing scientists from conducting modification experiments on human genes, we are opening the doors to designer babies and parents choosing the future of their children, therefore stripping them of their free will. Just like the genetically modified man in Gattaca, who had 12 fingers instead of 10. So how do you prevent mitochondrial changes from turning into designer babies? This is a slippery slope that could be exploited by people who have money and means. Let us not forget our history either. This is essentially what Hitler was trying to do with his Aryan race theory. Over time, certain traits, or genetic material, if you will be preferred at the exclusion of others. This will create a homogeneous population and moves against everything society is trying to do right now, which is be more diverse. We need a diverse and inclusive world. This is how we get better, be better, and do better. To prevent the use of genetic engineering, we need to take action. As early as June 2019, this law was being discussed at the Capitol. You can help prevent the editing of human genes by going to the Public Citizen website and bringing the topic of continuing the ban on gene editing babies back to the top of their agenda.